Pastor asked us if we could bring the devotion, and so we'll carry on, good Lord willing, with our Light Shine Bright theme. So I know I'm bouncing back and forth, but Light Shine Bright theme, and tonight, shining inside out. Shining inside out. And we'll be in Matthew chapter 5, verse 48 is where we'll start, Ben, but all through the Sermon on the Mount. And so how many of you tonight would like to be perfect? Perfect. Well, guess what? Jesus tells you that you can be, right? And he tells us how to be. And I believe, as a matter of fact, that most of you, I had to say most, but you are perfect in many ways. But in teaching us what this verse means, that word perfect there, Matthew 5:48, says, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father which is in heaven is perfect." That word means being of full age, complete, full grown, adult, or mature. So Jesus teaches us in the Sermon on the Mount what spiritually mature Christians look like. How to shine inside out, and that is the whole crux of the message. So Jesus teaches that genuine, visible Christianity is a direct product of inward Christ-likeness. So genuine, visible Christianity, you are the light of the world, that's a direct product of your internal, inward Christ-likeness. So we're going to take a jet view. I think that was Brother MacArthur. Didn't he have that? Was it a pamphlet, Jet View through Revelation or something? So I stole it from him. So a jet view through the Sermon on the Mount, because there's no way to get it all. And I know I'm biting off more than we can fit in the time period. So Lord help us, you do get something out of this. But a jet view through the Sermon on the Mount. And so if you study the Sermon on the Mount as a whole, and I suggest, especially young people, I say this, you ought to read this over and over and over and over. It'll help you grow so you can be perfect, be mature, be grown up in the Spirit. So if you study it as a whole, a central theme emerges, and you can say that the crux of the entire message is Matthew 5:20, Ben, if you'll turn there. Matthew 5:20. "For I say unto you," listen, "except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven." So if you read the entire message with that verse in mind, it opens up what Jesus is teaching throughout that whole sermon. The scribes and Pharisees, as you know, your righteousness got to exceed that. And so in our minds we think, yeah, we got to be more righteous. No, there's a whole different perfection, a whole different maturity that he's teaching in the Sermon on the Mount that he wants us to get to. You know, the scribes and the Pharisees, they had this superficial religion, but they had nothing inside. You remember the 7 woes to the 5 scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites there in Matthew 23. Later on, he mentions that, and I'm just going to read a couple so you kind of get the gist of what he's saying. It's got to exceed this. He said, "Woe unto you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites." And he also uses the word hypocrites in the Sermon on the Mount later. So he's tying this all in. "For ye make clean the outside of the cup and of the platter, but within they are full of extortions and excess." And then verse 27, "Woe unto you, scribes, Pharisees, hypocrites, for you're like unto whited sepulchres, which indeed appear beautiful outward." So there is an internal Christ-likeness that he's teaching. That's how you shine. And we'll try to hash it out and prove it. I say you got some explaining to do. We'll try to prove it out. So he's saying that you've got to exceed this. So a mature Christian shines from within. They shine inside out. God wants your heart. Isn't it always been that way? All the way back in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 5, he said, "Love the Lord thy God, your heart, with all your heart, soul, and mind." That's what he's wanted all along. It's all been about, hey, and then he saved us and he gave us a wonderful life and salvation and all these great things. He said, "Now serve me and love me with your heart." That's what he left it for us. And so that's what he's always wanted. So in this theme, if you look at verse 5:20, think about it as you read verse 5:48 again. He said, "Unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes, Pharisees, and hypocrites." And this is kind of he sandwiches in a whole lot between it. But on verse 48 it says, "Be ye therefore perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect." So there's a message here that he's trying to do it. A child of God comes to maturity when they shine inside out. When a child of God comes to the point in their lives where they understand righteousness comes from within. It exceeds, that's what exceeds the righteousness of the Pharisees and the scribes. Understanding that I don't just do what's right, I do it from my heart. And then when you do it from your heart, you're doing it for the right reason. And it isn't just because this is what God told me to do. And man, everybody saw me do it. I'm just glad I'm not like other men, you know. Oh, how we ought to be at the other, with our face on the ground and say, oh, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. And we know, like Paul said in Romans 7:18, that within us dwelleth no good thing. But thank God for Romans chapter 8, verse 1. There is therefore now no condemnation. There's your victory. So this message of the Sermon on the Mount, I believe that is the crux of the whole thing. So you read it with, your righteousness must exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. So Matthew chapter 5, verse 14. We're going to try to, ain't no way, but we're going to try. Matthew chapter 5, verse 14. This is that very familiar text, light shine bright, that very familiar, let your light shine. Ye are the light of the world, and a city set on a hill cannot be hid, neither do men light a candle and put it under a bushel, but on a candlestick, and he giveth light unto all that are in the house. Let your light so shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. So how do we know how to let our light shine? Well, guess what? Jesus goes in right after this. He goes straight into this. Verse 17. Think not that I come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass away, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till it all be fulfilled. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. And then back to that verse. For I say unto you, except your righteousness shall exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, ye shall in no case enter into the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus says, how do you do it? The law tells you how to do it. That's how Jesus didn't come and destroy it. He came and fulfilled it, did it perfectly, lived a perfect life, showed us how to do it. Paul goes through Romans 3 and 3:20 and tells you how the law, it teaches you and keeps you in knowing what sin is. I'm trying to go quick. So Romans 7:7 said, what shall we say then? Is the law sin? God forbid. Nay, I had not known sin but by the law. So Jesus goes straight into teaching how does our righteousness exceed the scribes and Pharisees? First, you got to know what to do is right and wrong, and then you do it right through your heart. So the law is the means by which we know how to please God, and doing the things that we know to please Him, if we do them from the heart, then our righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. It's a whole different perspective. If you look at serving God as, God's this hard taskmaster, and He wants me, He's got all these rules. No, you step over on the other side, man, God, He saved me. He sent His only Son to die for me. It is a joy to serve God. Now you're starting to mature a little bit in your shining. You're starting to mature a little bit, becoming perfect, becoming more mature, growing up in the Spirit. That's what this is. So Jesus, the Son of God, and he goes right through, right after verse 20, he starts into 6 examples of internal righteousness. And jet view, we're not going to go through them all, but they're really good. So if you got time, go back and read it if you like. But man, 6 examples of internal righteousness, and keep it in mind, except your righteousness exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees. Jesus takes 6 important Old Testament laws, and he doesn't change them. He doesn't make them void. He interprets them for his people in light of the new life that he's going to give them, and we have the power to be that verse right there. We have the power by the Holy Spirit to live and to mature and to live right for the Lord. He goes through 6 of them. The Pharisees measured righteousness by an outward compliance, right? I'm just doing so I did what was right? And these 6, murder, don't murder. He says, don't even be angry with your brother without a cause. That's an internal. Look, I can get mad as long as I don't kill the guy. No, he says, don't be angry. There's adultery and lust. the outward sin and then the inward sin. He said that's adultery as well. There's divorce and keeping your covenant. He said, well, Moses gave a divorcement, so by law I can do it. And he says, yeah, no, but I want you to be faithful to your covenant. An internal faithfulness. There's an oath that you say what you mean and mean what you say. There's retaliation. These are the 6, and these are not all inclusive. He's just kind of laying it out for us. There's retaliation, like if an eye for an eye, right? Like if you tell him that I have a right to take, he turns that upside down and says, no, you go the extra mile. You turn the other cheek. You give your cloak also. There's an internal lesson he's teaching us here in this Sermon on the Mount. And so for us to shine and to exceed the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, there's got to be something in here. And I believe there is in this group. I really do. But there's got to be something in here that produces that light. And what about enemies? Well, they're my enemies. What did he say to do? Love them. We make excuses, right? We excuse our way into attitudes and problems. He says, you know what? Love them. That doesn't leave us any excuse. There's no place he says, okay, you have a right to cut them off and to be. No, he says, love them. See how he's taking this, he's internalizing and saying, hey, if you are to get to the place where your light shines truly and it exceeds that of the Pharisees, here's how you do it. 6 things he teaches us. The Pharisees, they asked, did I technically obey? Jesus, he asked, what is in your heart? So outwardly, you might do the right things. Check the list, right? And man, my flesh, I'm bad about that. I check off the list. Yeah, I read my Bible today. Check. You know, I did my prayers, and I did this, and I did that. Check. My flesh feels good for the day. Yeah, thank God. So righteous. But Jesus says, what's in your heart? It will absolutely change your whole perspective if you come at it this way. Look at where he says there in Matthew 6:1. Matthew 6:1 through 18, he teaches us 3 things to do in secret. These are the things the Pharisees did in open, right? 3 examples of a right heart attitude for the things you do for the Lord. Alms, prayer, and fasting, right? And there's 18 verses there he goes through. And this was, again, not all inclusive, but these are the things the Pharisees failed at. So he says, look, if your righteousness, and if you want to shine like you're supposed to shine, you've got to get this right. Your righteousness has to exceed that of the Pharisees. So when you pray, don't go around and pray up in open places and say, everybody say, yeah, you know, I'm a good holy man. And y'all don't do that, but I'm just giving you the idea, right? When you fast, don't go around and make your face all sad like, I'm fasting today because When you pray and when you give alms, these things he say do in secret. And in this 18 verses also comes in the hypocrites. He said, don't do these as the hypocrites do. He says, do these in secret. You know what hypocrite interprets to be? A stage actor or performer. That's all it is. That's all they had. And he's saying, if you want to shine right, if you want to shine like the S-O-N, then you have to be, your righteousness has to exceed that. You have to be more perfect, matured, and grow to a place where you're doing these things from a heart attitude to God. These things he says do in secret, but guess what he'll do? He'll reward you in what? Openly. He said he'll award you in open. So if I have the right attitude, then I'm going to be lacking, right? I don't have nothing here on earth. And man, the pastor preached a great message on 4 things not to worry about. I don't remember if that was the title, but don't worry about your food. Don't worry about your drink. Don't worry about your life. Take no thought for your life, your food, your drink. Tomorrow, he's kind of teaching you, okay, so if I'm not going to have, if I'm going to not worry about, if I'm going to have this right attitude, and I'm going to be lacking some things as he goes into laying up your treasures in heaven and not on earth, well, I'm going to be lacking some stuff. He says, don't worry about those things. Chapter 7, verse 1 and through 6, he gives us an internal attitude towards people. So if our righteousness is going to exceed the Pharisees, we have to have a right attitude towards people. Remember that so familiar verse, and usually it's used wrong in defense of what you want to do, but judge not that ye be not judged. The Bible says judge not because you're judging me. But he's teaching us here that you have the right attitude towards people knowing who you are. That's the warning, is knowing who you are, but have the right attitudes toward people. Because guess where we normally judge people? in our hearts and in our minds. Pastor said something to me several years ago, and it stuck and made me think about what I say before I say it. He said, you know what? We don't know enough about people to judge them. You never know enough about people to judge. You just think you might know, but you don't know enough. So the best thing is judge not, lest you be judged. That's a heart attitude. And then also there in chapter 7, verse 7 through 12, he gives us the right heart attitude towards God, to ask, seek, and knock. Man, what a great lesson. What a great message. Ain't that good? It really is. Matthew 7:11, remember, he sums it up with that. If ye, being evil, know how to give good gifts unto your children, how much more shall your Father, which is in heaven, give good things to them that ask him? What a good message. So, shining inside out, and I think I got this, and I hope it made sense. It was a jet view. I was just flying, so I hope it made some sense. But teaching us, and man, there's a great study there. And you go through every one and say, man, if we're going to shine, we got to shine inside out. We've got to shine inside out. So keep in mind that the Lord Jesus, he sums up, he concludes this Sermon on the Mount with Matthew 7:13, Ben, if you'll go there. And I'll read these. Matthew 7:13. Remember, 5:20 says, except your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the Pharisees. It says, enter in the straight gate, for wide is the great gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be that go thereat. Because straight is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few be that find it. There's few that'll follow and sacrifice flesh and sacrifice self. You know, he's drawing a very clear distinction between what happens if you don't. The scribes and the Pharisees, this is the path, this is the direction, this is where they go, and what happens when you do? What happens when you're shining, the other side of this? Beware of false prophets which come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are raving wolves. Ye know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes of thorns and figs, or figs of thistles? Even so every tree bringeth forth good fruit, but a corrupt tree bringeth forth evil fruit. A good tree cannot bring forth evil fruit, neither can a corrupt tree bring forth good fruit. Every tree that bringeth forth not good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire. Wherefore by their fruits ye shall know them. Lord, help us that we're producing some good fruit from that shining from inside out. That's the only way. And you can go into the fruit of the Spirit. That's love, joy, peace. Guess what all those are? They're internal attitudes of how you approach life, how you go through this life. And then once you're getting that right, you're beginning to become perfect. Not in a sense where you never do wrong, but you're maturing. You're growing up in the Lord. You're growing up in the Spirit. Verse 21, not everyone that saith unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter into the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name have cast out devils, and in thy name done many wonderful works? And then will I profess unto them, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. There's a good distinction here, isn't there? Therefore, whosoever heareth these sayings of mine, and what? Doeth them, I will liken him unto a wise man, which built his house upon a rock. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And everyone that heareth these sayings of mine, and doeth them not, shall be likened unto a foolish man, which built his house upon the sand. And the rain descended, and the flood came, and the winds blew, and beat upon that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it. Man, if we want to stand, and we want to shine, and we want to be that shining light, to be able to have light shine bright, we've got to get this right in our lives. We've got to shine inside out. In this closing section of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus gives a very clear picture of the opposite paths. The righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, and the mature Christian shining. Here there's two gates, two ways, two destinations, two groups of people, two kinds of trees, two kinds of fruit, two groups and two judgments, two kinds of builders built on two kinds of foundations. Christ draws this clear distinction for us. And man, for us to shine, my desire is to work on inside. That's where it's going to start. And thank God that by the power of God in us, we can be perfect, even as our Father in heaven is perfect. And that's how that's maturing as you go through. Man, it absolutely changes your perspective when you come at it saying, Lord, I love you because you love me. There's not just a duty list of things that I got to do to serve God. But to be able to shine truly and have that genuine light that shines out, it's got to be inside out. Whew. So I hope that made some sense tonight. Man, I love the Sermon on the Mount. I love saying we did a school year on it and spent 9 months in it, and it's a go-to. Actually, to be honest, I went to it one time reading, and I had an ought or something. I was like, I'm going to read and find signs, verses where I could tell them where, man, the Lord whooped me through the Sermon on the Mount, and I loved it ever since. Like, Lord, you're right. I was so wrong. So it's so true that is how it's maturing us. That's where your light will really, truly shine. All right. Well, let's pray.